I was standing at the sink, trying to scrub yesterday's coffee stain out of my favorite mug, when the phone rang. The mug is old and chipped on the rim. My wife bought it at a yard sale years before she died. It has a faded picture of a lighthouse on it, the kind of thing you stop seeing after a while, until a crack runs right through the middle of it and suddenly you're afraid to lose it. The water was lukewarm, the kind that never quite decides if it wants to be hot or cold. Outside, the afternoon light was sliding through the thin curtains in stripes, catching the dust in the air. It made the kitchen look more tired than it already was. The phone rang again. I almost let it go to voicemail. At my age, calls at strange hours are usually hospitals, insurance, or people trying to sell you something you don't need and can't afford. Still, the sound kept cutting through the silence of the house, insisting. I dried my hand on the same dish towel I've had for years and reached for the phone on the wall. Hello? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for my stomach to tighten. Mr. Harris? A male voice asked, careful, like he was stepping into a room he wasn't sure he was allowed in. Yes, I said. Who's this? This is Ethan, sir. I was the photographer at your daughter Emma's wedding last week. For a second, the kitchen changed for me. The dull grey tile under my feet became white aisle runner. The faint smell of detergent turned into flowers and perfume and champagne. I saw Emma again, in her dress, fingers digging into my arm, trying not to cry in front of everyone. I gripped the phone a little tighter. Right, I said, trying to steady my voice. Sure, I remember. The photos are ready already? On the other end of the line, I heard him exhale slowly. They're technically ready, he replied. But that's not why I'm calling. There was something in the way he said that. I've been on this earth 62 years. You learn to hear what people are not saying. His words were careful, but the fear underneath them wasn't. I moved the mug aside and leaned against the counter, eyes on the small window above the sink. My backyard looked exactly the same as it had that morning and the morning before that. Crooked fence, patchy grass, the maple tree Emma used to climb when she was little, branches bare except for a few stubborn leaves. What's going on? I asked. I think... He stopped, corrected himself. I know there's something you need to see in the photos, sir. I didn't feel right just sending them in an email. I need you to come down to my studio if you can. My throat went dry. Something wrong with the pictures? I tried to joke. Did you catch my bad side or something? He didn't laugh. It's not about you, Mr. Harris, he said quietly. It's about your daughter and your son-in-law. It's disturbing. I don't want to say more over the phone. The word disturbing landed in the middle of my small kitchen like a brick. I turned away from the window and looked at the kitchen table. One chair pulled out, the other pushed in. An old placemat still stained with tomato sauce from the night Emma and I tried to cook together before she moved in with him. There was an empty spot on the wall where her childhood drawings used to hang. She'd taken them down herself before the wedding. Before I tell you what Ethan showed me on that screen, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and if you'd have gone to that studio alone after a phone call like that. I want to know how many of you would rather not know what's hiding in the background of happy pictures. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Did something happen at the wedding? I asked. Because I was there. I didn't see anything. Another silence. I could hear a faint humming on his side. Maybe a computer, maybe the fluorescent light studios always seem to have. It reminded me of hospital lights. That's the thing, sir, he said. No one saw it. I didn't even see it when I took the shots. But when I loaded everything onto the big screen and started going through them, it was there. Again and again. The way he holds her. Her face when she thinks nobody's looking. I'm not trying to cause problems, but I also can't pretend I didn't see it. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, the start of a headache or something worse. My mind jumped between frames I didn't even have yet. Emma laughing, Emma dancing, Emma hiding something. Mark's hand at her waist, Mark's eyes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I swallowed. Ethan, I said, hearing my own voice crack just enough to betray me. Are you telling me my daughter is in danger? He took a breath. When he answered, he chose each word like it might explode. I'm saying, he replied, that if she were my daughter, I would want to see these photos with my own eyes today. I looked at the clock on the microwave, 4:12 p.m. The same time Emma used to come home from school and drop her backpack in the hallway, complaining about homework, asking what was for dinner. The same time the house had started to get quiet after she moved out. Where's your studio? I asked. He gave me the address. It wasn't far. 20 minutes on foot if my knees behaved, 10 if I took the bus. I wrote it down on the back of an old electricity bill, pen scratching a little too hard. I'll be here until 7, he added. Just ask for me when you arrive. And Mr. Harris, I'm sorry, I really am. We hung up. For a moment, I just stood there, the dial tone echoing in the space between my ears. The house felt smaller than usual, like the walls had moved in closer without asking. I looked at the mug still sitting in the sink, a ring of brown at the bottom. My wife's lighthouse stared back at me through the crack in the ceramic. Disturbing, I repeated under my breath. It's funny. People think families break because of big things, affairs, crimes, huge fights. But sometimes all it takes is one phone call from a stranger and a folder full of frozen moments. I turned off the tap, grabbed my coat from the hook by the door and stepped out into the late afternoon air. The sky was turning a pale, indifferent blue. Somewhere in this town, my daughter was living her new married life, believing the worst part of the wedding was over. I had no idea that the short walk to that studio with that cheap coat and that piece of paper in my pocket was the first step toward watching my family come apart, one picture at a time. My name is Michael Harris, and if you came to my house on any given morning, you'd probably think you'd walked into a place that time forgot. The floor in the hallway still creaks in the same spot it did 20 years ago. The wallpaper in the living room is peeling at the corners, showing a thin line of bare wall underneath like an old scar. The couch sags a little in the middle, right where my daughter Emma used to throw herself down after school with a dramatic sigh and say she was never going back there again. I live alone now. Just me, the ticking kitchen clock, and the sound of the fridge humming like an old man trying his best to keep going. People see an old house like mine and assume there's nothing much to say about the man living in it. But this house has seen everything. It knows the sound of my wife's laugh, the pitch of Emma's cries as a baby, the silence that came after both of them were gone. One to the grave, the other to a man she thought was love. Before the photographer called me, before wedding photos and courtrooms and police reports, there was just us, me, Claire and Emma. Claire loved photos. She had this old Nikon camera she treated like a fourth family member. The strap was worn smooth where her fingers always held it. She kept extra rolls of film in a biscuit tin above the fridge. Our house was full of little clicks and flashes long before phones learned to do everything. Life moves fast, she'd say, squinting one eye as she framed a shot of Emma trying to blow out candles without spitting on the cake. You think you'll remember everything, but you won't. One day these photos will be all we have left of this. I used to laugh and tell her she was being dramatic. Back then it was impossible to imagine a world where her voice was just an echo in my head. The day she died, the camera was in the back seat of the car. Rainy night, bad visibility. A truck, a red light ignored. A hospital that smelled like bleach and loss. They handed me a plastic bag with her belongings, her wedding ring, her wallet, and that camera. The lens was cracked. The strap was soaked. I took it home and never fixed it. It sits in a drawer now under a pile of dish towels I never use, like a heart I'm not ready to look at. Emma was 13 when we buried her mother. She stood next to me at the graveyard, hands buried in the pockets of her too thin coat, hair sticking to her cheeks in the drizzle. The sound of the dirt hitting the coffin lid might as well have been hitting our kitchen walls, our photo frames, our future. That night, in the same old kitchen, she gripped my sleeve and looked at me with eyes that had aged 10 years in one day. "Don't leave me too, Dad," she whispered. "Please, I couldn't survive that." "I'm not going anywhere," I told her. "You and me, okay? We're staying. We're stubborn." I meant it, every word. After that, life became something we built out of whatever was left. I learned to braid hair using a plastic doll head she'd gotten one Christmas. I learned the difference between mascara and eyeliner because she refused to go to school with clown eyes. I burned more dinners than I'd like to admit. Our smoke alarm used to go off so often that Emma said the house was applauding our attempts at cooking. We had rituals. Little, ordinary things that felt like anchors in a world that had lost its center. Every Tuesday was pasta night, no matter how bad I made it. Saturday mornings, we cleaned the house together with the radio on too loud, her singing off key while polishing framed photos of the three of us. On Sunday evenings, we sat on the back steps with mugs of tea. Mine with too much sugar, hers with none because she was trying to be healthy, and watched the sky turn from blue to gold to grey. The maple tree in the backyard was her kingdom. She climbed that thing like it was a ladder to a better world. Sometimes she'd sit on the lowest branch with her knees pulled up, chin resting on them, staring at the houses beyond our fence. "What are you thinking about?" I'd ask from the doorway. "Everything," she'd say. "Nothing. Mom. The future. Whether anyone at school would notice if I disappeared." My heart always clenched at that. I tried to fill the house with proof that she mattered. There were photos everywhere. On the hallway wall, framed and slightly crooked. Emma eating ice cream with half of it on her shirt. Emma holding a cheap plastic trophy from a school spelling bee. Emma with 2 missing front teeth, grinning like she'd won the lottery. On the fridge, held up by magnets, were older pictures of me and Claire on our wedding day. Her in her simple dress, me in a suit that didn't quite fit right. Both of us looking at each other like the rest of the world had disappeared. I used to catch Emma staring at that photo sometimes. "Was it really like that?" she asked me once, finger tracing the outline of our faces on the magnet-covered surface. "Like what?" I replied. "Like, simple, happy, no drama. Just you and Mom against everything." I thought about the bills we'd argued over, the nights we went to bed angry, the apologies over burnt dinners. But I also thought about how she always reached for my hand when we crossed the street, even after years of marriage. How she'd hum in the kitchen while cooking, leaning back into me when I came up behind her. Yeah, I said finally. It was. Simple doesn't mean easy, you know. It just means honest. I saw something flicker across Emma's face. Want, maybe. Or fear that she'd never have that. Then one day she brought him home. I still remember the sound of the door opening that night. The way her voice changed. Lighter, brighter, almost rehearsed. Dad, we're here. We. It was the first time I heard that word come out of her mouth and not mean me and her. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stepped into the hallway. He stood there like he owned the place. Mark. Good suit, perfect smile, hair that probably had its own budget. He stuck out his hand like he was closing a deal. Mr. Harris, sir, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, he said. Finally. Like there had been a whole story happening without me. And this was just my cameo. His hand was warm, his grip too firm like he was testing me. Emma hovered just behind him, eyes shining in that way I'd seen only a few times. When she got into her college of choice, when she won that stupid spelling bee, when she learned to ride a bike without falling. I told myself that glow meant he was good for her. I ignored the little knot in my stomach when he glanced at the wedding photo on the fridge and smirked like he knew he'd be replacing it soon. We sat down to dinner at the old kitchen table. My plates were mismatched. His watch cost more than everything on that table combined. He complimented my overcooked chicken like it was gourmet. He told stories about his job, his clients, his latest promotion. Emma laughed too hard at his jokes, checking my face every so often like she needed me to clap. He kept touching her. Hand on her knee under the table, fingers on her shoulder when she got up to get more water, a palm on the small of her back as she moved past him. It was subtle, polite, acceptable, but it never stopped, like he was reminding both of us that she was with him now. I watched him watch her, and for the first time something cold crept into my chest, something I couldn't name yet. Back then, I didn't know that the same camera that once captured every joy in this house would one day reveal the truth about the man sitting calmly across from me, complimenting my cooking. All I knew was that my little girl was laughing, and I forced myself to laugh too, telling my uneasy heart to be quiet. Because that's what parents do sometimes, isn't it? We choose not to see the shadows, until someone shines a flash on them and sends us the proof. I wish I could tell you that the first time I saw Mark I knew. I wish I could say some old man instinct kicked in, that I took one look at his polished shoes and neat hair and said, no, not him. But life isn't that kind of movie. Sometimes the villain walks in smiling, carrying a bottle of wine. That night, he stood in my hallway like he'd stepped out of a commercial. Mr. Harris, sir, it's an honor to finally meet you, he said, gripping my hand. Up close, he smelled like something expensive, not the cheap cologne you grab at the supermarket. His watch shone under the weak hallway light. Emma hovered behind him, almost hiding, but her eyes never left my face. Well, I said, clearing my throat, if you're going to eat my overcooked food, you can drop the sir and call me Michael. He laughed, too quickly, too loud. I like him already, he said to Emma like I wasn't standing right there. We sat around the same old kitchen table that had seen birthdays, homework meltdowns, and long talks about boys who didn't text back. Now there was a new boy at the table and everything felt off. Not wrong, just rearranged. I'd made pasta because it was cheap and I knew how not to ruin it most of the time. It still came out a bit overdone, but Mark ate it like it was the best thing he'd had all week. This is incredible, he said, twirling it on his fork. I've been telling Emma she's spoiled, having a dad who cooks like this. Emma blushed, watched me carefully, waiting for my reaction like the words were bait. I shrugged. You're both lying, but I'll take the compliment. He laughed again. His hand slid under the table to Emma's knee. I saw the movement, the way her shoulders relaxed when he touched her, like she'd been holding her breath since walking through the door. That was the first thing I noticed about him. He always had to be touching her. A hand on her waist, fingers on the back of her neck, palm resting on her thigh. Small things, normal things, but constant. As we ate, he talked. He talked about his job in finance, about clients and risk and returns. He talked about his plans. Bigger apartment, better car, vacations. Once we get out of this starter phase. He said we so often that after a while, I realized he never once asked me anything about myself. Emma told me your wife passed when she was young, he said suddenly mid-bite. His tone was light, casual, like commenting on the weather. Must have been tough, raising her alone. I felt the air shift. It was, I answered. But we managed. He nodded slowly, as if I'd just passed a test. Well, you did a great job, he said, looking at Emma. She's loyal, grounded. Not like most women I've dated. Loyal. The word sat wrong in my ears. After dinner, he helped clear the table, stacking plates with the ease of someone playing the role of good boyfriend. At one point, he paused by the fridge, eyes on the old wedding photo of me and Claire. She looked beautiful, he said. Simple. Classic. She was, I replied. He smiled, then added, I can see where Emma gets it. Only difference is Emma will have a much bigger life. I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a warning. For a while after that first dinner, things were quiet. Emma came by less often. When she did, she was glowing in that way people do when they're newly loved, or think they are. She talked about restaurants he took her to, places he wanted to travel, the fancy gym in his building. He's just driven, Dad, she would say, fiddling with her bracelet. He knows what he wants. He has a plan. It feels safe. Safe. I didn't say what I was thinking. That sometimes the people with the clearest plans think of everyone around them as part of the furniture. The first crack showed up on a Tuesday night. We were sitting at the kitchen table, invoices spread out in front of me. Emma had stopped by for 5 minutes and stayed an hour. She was scrolling on her phone, smiling at something. Dad? She asked suddenly, not looking up. If Mark and I, moved forward like for real, would you be okay with us managing the house stuff differently? I put my pen down. What do you mean differently? She finally looked at me. Well, it's just, Mark's good with money. It's literally his job. He thinks it doesn't make sense for everything to be split up. Your account, my savings, Mom's old policy, the house papers, it's messy. He said it would be easier if he consolidated everything, just for a while. For planning the wedding, for our future. My ears rang. Consolidated, I repeated slowly. Into what? Into one account, she said quickly. He'd handle it, so we don't mess things up. He says people lose a lot just because they don't know how to invest. He wants to help. He said it's dumb to leave money rotting in a savings account. His words, not mine. She tried to laugh, but it came out thin. I stared at her, at the way she twisted the bracelet on her wrist, at the small bruise I hadn't noticed on the inside of her arm, a fingerprint-shaped bruise, or maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it was nothing. The house, I said carefully, is in my name. Your mother wanted it to be your safety net, not a chip on someone's poker table. Emma's shoulders tensed. Nobody's gambling with anything, Dad, she replied, a bit sharper now. Mark just thinks we could do more with what we have. Better wedding. Better start. He said you might not understand. There it was. Soft at first. He said you might not understand. I could feel the old anger rising. The one I'd pushed down for years so Emma wouldn't see how tired I really was. Emma, I said, keeping my voice low. I'm not signing this house or any money over to a man I've had dinner with twice. I'm not handing your mother's sacrifices to someone whose favorite word is investment. He can prove himself as a husband first. Then we talk about finances. Her eyes flashed. Wow, she said. You really don't like him, do you? I rubbed my forehead. It's not about liking him, I answered. It's about protecting you. She scoffed. Mark said this would happen, she muttered. He said you wouldn't respect him, that you'd think he was after money, that you'd try to control everything like you always do. The words hit harder than I expected. Is that what you think too? I asked quietly. She hesitated, and that hesitation hurt more than any yes would have. I think you're scared of letting me grow up, she finally said. You're so stuck in this house, in these old photos, in the way things were with Mom, that you can't see I'm not a little girl in a tree anymore. Mark sees my potential. You just see risk. She stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. I'm not asking permission, she added. I'm asking you to trust me. I wanted to scream, I do trust you, I don't trust him. But the words jammed in my throat. We stood there, two people in a small worn-out kitchen full of memories, suddenly on opposite sides of a line I hadn't known we'd drawn. I won't sign anything, I said. Not now, not like this. Her jaw tightened. I have to go, she said, grabbing her bag. Mark's waiting. I told him you'd probably say no. He said you would rather see me struggle than let him help. My chest burned. That's not true, I managed. She stopped at the doorway, back to me. Then prove it, she said. Stop treating him like the enemy. The door closed behind her. The sound was soft, polite, not a slam. Somehow that was worse. I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by photos of her at every age. Her first day of school, her missing teeth, her graduation. Moments where she'd looked at me like I hung the moon. Now there was a man out there telling her I was the problem, and she was starting to believe him. I didn't know it yet, but that conversation over unpaid bills and an old kitchen table was the first ask, the first test. The first time Mark tried to stretch invisible fingers into the only thing I'd left to give, security. The next time he reached for something, it wouldn't be money on paper. It would be my daughter's body, her freedom, her face frozen in photographs she wouldn't even remember being taken. The morning of the wedding started like any other day in my house, with silence. The kettle rattled on the stove, the clock ticked on the wall, and the light came in through the thin curtains in pale strips, catching the floating dust. Same house, same creaking floorboard, same old lighthouse mug sitting next to the sink, a faint brown ring at the bottom from yesterday's coffee. The only difference was the suit hanging on the back of my bedroom door. I hadn't worn it in years. I took it down like I was lifting something fragile. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar from the cheap hanger and something older, churches, funerals, a job interview long forgotten. I thought of my wedding day with Claire. Same nervousness, same shaking hands, very different reasons. My phone buzzed on the table. Emma. Dad, don't forget. Pick up at 11:30. Please don't be late. I smiled in spite of everything. She still used the same pleading emoji she did when she wanted extra dessert at 14. I'll be early, I texted back. Promise. I made myself a weak cup of coffee and sat at the table looking at the empty chair across from me. For a second, I imagined Claire sitting there, rolling her eyes at my crooked tie, telling me not to cry too much when I walked Emma down the aisle. You're going to cry, I muttered to myself, voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. Don't pretend you're not. By 11:15, I was in the car, suit a little tight around the shoulders, hands too sweaty on the steering wheel. The sky was clear, too clear. The kind of bright blue that makes you feel exposed. Emma was getting ready at a rented country house about 20 minutes out of town. As I drove, the houses thinned out into fields and patches of trees. The kind of place people choose for rustic weddings they post online with captions about simplicity that cost more money than I made in a month. When I pulled up, there were already cars lined up on the gravel. White folding chairs set up on the lawn. A white arch near the edge of a small lake, draped in flowers. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. I stepped out of the car and immediately smelled cut grass, perfume, and the faint tang of lake water. Birds chattered in a nearby tree. Somewhere someone laughed too loud. Michael, a woman called. It was one of Claire's sisters, already dressed, hair sprayed into submission. She hugged me too tightly, eyes scanning my face like she could read the years on it. You clean up well, she said. You ready for this? No, I thought. As I'll ever be, I said. Inside the house, it smelled like makeup, hairspray, and nerves. Laughter bounced off the high ceilings, but it was thin around the edges. Small rooms were full of big dresses, curling irons, and women walking carefully in shoes that hurt. I found Emma standing in front of a mirror in one of the upstairs rooms. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. She was in white, simple, not too puffy. Exactly the kind of dress Claire would have loved. Her hair was pinned up with small flowers woven through it. There was a line between her brows she was trying to smooth out with foundation. When she saw me in the mirror, her eyes filled. Don't, I said quickly, stepping forward. You'll ruin the makeup. She turned and walked straight into my arms, nearly knocking the breath out of me. You came, she whispered into my chest as if there had been any doubt. I told you I would, I answered, pressing my hand gently to the back of her head, careful not to disturb the flowers. You look like your mother. She'd be losing her mind right now. Emma pulled back, laughing through her tears. Don't make me cry, Dad, she said, wiping carefully at the corners of her eyes. They spent an hour on this face. Behind her, I saw movement. A young man with a camera strap across his chest, Ethan, though I didn't know his name yet, stood in the doorway, lifting his lens slowly, like he didn't want to intrude. Mind if he asked. I nodded. He took a shot. Click. I heard the sound, and for a heartbeat, I saw Claire again, old Nikon in hand, capturing another ordinary miracle. Okay, Emma said, taking a shaky breath. Okay, let's do this before I change my mind and run away to join the circus. I laughed. We walked down the stairs together later, her arm looped through mine. Every step felt loud. On the landing, we paused by a window that looked out over the lawn. Guests were taking their seats. A string quartet was tuning up under a white canopy. The lake shimmered in the sun, throwing little shards of light across the grass. There he is, Emma said, her voice changing slightly. Mark stood at the arch, talking to someone, laughing. Suit perfect, hair perfect, smile perfect. He looked like a picture in a brochure for a life I never had. You ready? I asked. Her grip tightened on my arm for a second. Too tight, then loosened. Yes, she said. Yes, I am. But her eyes didn't match the word. Ethan was at the bottom of the stairs, camera ready. Beautiful, he murmured as we approached, more to himself than to us. Just stay there a second. He snapped a few shots of us at the foot of the stairs, then as we stepped outside. The brightness of the day hit us all at once. I heard the rustle of programs, the murmur of guests turning, the first notes of a song beginning. We walked. The aisle was a narrow strip of white fabric laid across grass that was just a little too uneven. Emma's dress brushed my shoes. The flowers lining the path smelled faintly sweet, mixed with sunscreen and perfume and the damp earth near the water. I could feel everyone looking at us, my throat closed up. Halfway down, I felt Emma's fingers dig into my arm just for a moment. You okay? I whispered sideways. Smile, she whispered back through clenched teeth. People are watching. I forced my mouth into something that felt like a smile. Ethan's camera clicked as we walked, capturing the curve of her veil, the way my shoulders sagged, the sunlight hitting her hair. Somewhere in those photos, there is a frozen second where you can see the exact moment my daughter stopped being just mine. At the arch, Mark took her from me. Literally. He reached out, grinning, and his hand closed around her upper arm, pulling her gently but firmly toward him. His grip stayed a fraction of a second too long. His thumb pressed into the soft flesh just under her shoulder. If you'd been watching from the chairs, you would have said, how sweet, he's guiding her. If you zoomed in later on a big screen, you'd see the faint whitening of his knuckles at the pressure. I did not have a zoom lens in my eyes that day. I saw a happy groom. The ceremony blurred. The officiant talked about love and commitment. People dabbed at their eyes. The lake glittered in the background like a fake painting. A breeze lifted the edge of Emma's veil and sent a couple of napkins skittering across the grass. When it came time for the vows, Emma's voice shook once, then steadied. Mark's voice didn't shake at all. He sounded rehearsed, confident, like he was giving a presentation at work. You look beautiful, he murmured to her when they thought the microphone was too far to catch it. Ethan caught it anyway, from across the aisle through the lens. Emma's lips curved up, but her eyes darted just for a heartbeat toward the crowd, toward me. I missed it. I was too busy trying not to cry, holding onto the edge of the chair to ground myself. They were pronounced husband and wife. People clapped, whistled, stood. The sound rolled over us like a wave. Mark kissed Emma. On cue. Perfectly timed for the camera. Click. After the ceremony, there were photos by the lake. Family of the bride, someone called. We arranged ourselves like furniture. Siblings, cousins, aunt, me in the center next to Emma, Mark glued to her side. We smiled. The grass was damp under my shoes. My back hurt, but I stood a little taller, like somehow posture could make up for everything I couldn't give her. Between setups, they walked to the edge of the water. I watched from a distance as Ethan lifted the camera again. Emma's dress spread around her like foam. The reflection of the sky rippled at her feet. Mark stood beside her, one hand on her waist. His fingers drifted higher, then squeezed. In person, it looked like a tender gesture. Later, zoomed in, you could see her ribs pulling inward under his grip. You could see the skin on her arm blanch where his thumb pressed. You could see her lips still smiling while her eyes had gone glassy and distant. After the formal photos, the afternoon slid into evening. There was a tent for dinner, strung with warm fairy lights that made everyone look softer than they really were. The smell of roasted meat and garlic drifted from the buffet. Glasses clinked. People told stories about Emma as a child, about how she'd always been so mature, so responsible, so ready for this next step. I sat at my assigned table, a little off to the side. My name was written in neat cursive on a card. Michael, father of the bride. As if anyone here needed the reminder. As if I could forget. I watched them through the soft glow. The first dance, his hand on her back, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. From a distance, they looked like every bride and groom in every wedding video. Up close, in the still frames, Ethan clicked off. There were other details. The way her fingertips pressed into his shoulder, not resting, but bracing. The way her eyes opened sometimes when her face was turned away from him, scanning the room as if looking for an exit. The way his mouth was at her ear, lips moving in words no one else could hear. Ethan moved around them quietly. He crouched, stood on chairs, leaned against posts. He captured the cake cutting, the toasts, the way Mark's jaw tightened whenever someone made a joke at his expense. He caught Emma laughing with her friends, laughter that looked real until you noticed how her shoulders flinched when Mark's voice cut across the room. At one point, I saw Ethan lower his camera, frown, then lift it again and zoom in when he thought nobody was paying attention. Near the bathrooms, there was a narrow hallway with a door that wouldn't quite latch. I didn't see what happened there that night, but Ethan's camera did. He had gone in to adjust his flash, testing the light. The test shot fired through the half-open door of a side room. Click. On the tiny screen of his camera, it probably looked like nothing at first, a blur of dress and suit, a sliver of wall. Later, enlarged on his computer, it would show Emma pressed back against that wall, Mark's hand clamped around her upper arm. His face inches from hers, mouth twisted in fury. Her head turned slightly away, eyes squeezed shut, lips parted in a silent breath. By then, guests were dancing. My knees hurt, so I'd retreated to a corner chair. Emma came over once, face flushed, hair falling out of its pins. She sat beside me, kicked off her heels under the table, wiggling her toes with a sigh. "You surviving?" I asked. "Barely," she huffed. "Mark's parents keep asking when we're going to give them grandkids. We're not even done with the cake yet." I chuckled. Her hand found mine under the table. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "And for everything. Even if you don't agree with all of it." The words pricked, but I let them pass. "I'll always come when you call," I said. "That's the deal, remember?" She smiled, but there was something behind it, something I couldn't name. A song changed. Someone called her back to the dance floor. She slipped her hand from mine and stood up. "Don't go yet, okay?" she said. "Stay a little longer." I nodded. "I will." I lasted another hour. By then the music was too loud, the lights too bright, the edges of the night starting to blur. My head ached. My feet felt like they were carrying all 62 years of my life. I found Emma near the edge of the dance floor, talking to one of her friends. Mark was across the room, laughing at something a coworker said, drink in hand. I'm heading out, I said, leaning close so she could hear me. Old man bedtime. She turned, surprised. Already? She asked. You'll be fine without me, I replied, trying to sound light. You've got your whole new life right here. Her face did something complicated then. Like a wave hit it and smoothed everything out. Okay, she said. Text me when you get home? I will. I cupped her face like I had when she was small. Her makeup was perfect, not a smudge. Her eyes shone in the fairy lights. I'm proud of you, I said, because I thought that's what a father was supposed to say on a day like this. Don't cry, she teased. You'll make my mascara run. She hugged me. For a heartbeat, I felt her shoulders shaking. I thought it was emotion. I thought it was joy. I've replayed that hug 1,000 times since then, wondering if it was something else. I left. The night air was cooler outside, crisper. The music thumped faintly through the walls as I walked to my car. Above the trees, the sky was clear, a few early stars daring to peek out. The lake lay still behind the house, reflecting the fairy lights like scattered coins. At home, I hung my suit back on the door. I sat at the kitchen table with a new brown ring in the lighthouse mug and told myself I was exhausted, not lonely. I thought the day was over. For a week, life went on. I went to work. I came home. I looked at the one photo someone had sent me from their phone. Emma and Mark smiling at the camera, cake knife in hand, frosting on her thumb. I set it as my phone wallpaper because that's what parents do. Then the phone rang one afternoon, and a nervous voice asked me to come to a studio above a laundromat on the other side of town. The place smelled like old paper, dust, and the sharp tang of printer ink when I stepped in. The waiting area had a fake plant and a stack of magazines nobody read. On the walls hung framed photos of other people's perfect moments. Smiling couples, giggling babies, families in matching outfits. Mr. Harris? Ethan stepped out from behind a computer, dark circles under his eyes. Thank you for coming. He led me into a dim room where a large monitor glowed on a desk. Beside it was his camera, strap coiled neatly, lens cap off. I made a selection, he said, fingers hovering over the mouse. I know we're supposed to do a slideshow, send a link, maybe make an album. But when I started going through them, I couldn't just treat them like any other job. My chest tightened. Just show me, I said. Please. He clicked. The first photo appeared on the screen. Emma and me at the top of the stairs. Her in white, me in my too tight suit. Her arms around my neck laughing. It was beautiful. It hurt. Lovely, I murmured, throat thick. He clicked again. Emma walking down the aisle, arm in arm with me. Guests turned toward us, faces blurred into a background of color. Her smile was wide. If you didn't look too closely, you'd say, she looks so happy. Ethan zoomed in. Her eyes were wet, not joy wet, glassy. Her hand clutched my arm hard enough to make the fabric crease sharply under her fingers. I didn't notice that at the time, I whispered. He nodded, lips pressed thin. Photo after photo flicked past. Ring exchange, first kiss, cake, dancing. The same pattern repeated. Smiles for the crowd, something else in the tiny muscles around her eyes. Then he opened a folder marked unfiltered. Candids. These are the ones I usually cull, he said. The in-betweens. But these are the ones that wouldn't leave me alone. He clicked. Emma and Mark by the lake from a distance. Everyone around them slightly blurred, out of focus. Ethan zoomed in on just them. Mark's hand on her waist, fingers digging in. The indentation visible even through the fabric. Could be nothing, I said, trying to breathe. Nerves. He's holding her steady. Maybe, Ethan said. He clicked again. But look. Another shot. Same moment. A split second later. Emma's smile frozen. Eyes unfocused. Her other hand hovering slightly away from her body. Fingers splayed like they'd started to reach for something and then changed their mind. We're trained to see tension in bodies, Ethan said softly. How people really feel when they think they're not the main subject. Your daughter looks tense. A lot. He moved faster now, like ripping off bandages. Emma dancing, Mark's mouth at her ear, his expression not joyous but tight. Emma's lips stretched in a grin, eyes distant. Emma sitting at the table, everyone laughing, Mark's hand on her thigh under the tablecloth. Only the angle of his wrist visible, the tendons prominent like his grip was hard. Then he opened one last image. I wasn't supposed to take this, he said. It was an accident. I was testing the flash. The picture came up dark at first. A narrow hallway, a half-open door. Ethan zoomed in, adjusted the exposure. The room brightened. There they were. Emma back against the wall, head turned to the side. Mark in front of her, face inches away, mouth twisted. His fingers wrapped around her upper arm, squeezing. Hard. Even in that lousy accidental shot, you could see the pressure. You could see the forced stillness in her shoulders, like an animal waiting for something to pass. No sound. No bruises yet. But the violence was there, coiled in his posture. My hand went numb on the edge of the desk. I didn't even notice when I took it, Ethan said. I was just checking the light. When I got home and went through everything on the big screen, this popped up. And then all the other little things started making sense. The way she flinched when he touched her. The way his face changed when she looked away too long. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen, at my daughter's face in that grainy hallway. Eyes half closed, jaw clenched, lips parted like she was mid-sentence or mid-breath or mid-prayer. My mind tried to argue with what my eyes were seeing. He's just stressed. Weddings are intense. Maybe they were fighting about something tiny. Everyone fights. Not my daughter. Not my Emma. She would have told me. Would she? I thought of the times she'd brushed off the bruises as clumsiness. The way she'd apologized to Mark for things that weren't her fault. The way her laugh had gotten a little tighter in the months before the wedding. The room felt too small. I took a step back, hand on my chest, trying to find air. I'm sorry, Ethan said. I know this is a lot. If she were my sister or my daughter, I'd want someone to show me. I nodded barely. My voice came out rough. Can you send me all of these? Every single one where he's touching her. Every one where she looks like that. Of course, he said. I've already backed them up. I also spoke to a friend who works with victims. She said, sometimes evidence like this can help. If she ever wants out. The word hit me like a wave. Because in every one of those photos, Emma looked like someone trapped behind glass, smiling for the camera, for the guest, for me. But the truth was there, hiding in the background, in the grip of his hand, in the angle of her shoulders. I had spent years trusting photos, believing they were proof of love, of joy, of survival. Now photos were the only proof I had that something was terribly, terribly wrong. I sank into the chair in front of the monitor, knees suddenly too weak to hold me. On the screen, my daughter stared back at me from that hallway, caught in a moment she probably didn't even remember. And for the first time since the hospital called me about Claire, I felt that familiar, helpless dread. The knowledge that the people I love most had been living in a story I didn't see until it was almost too late. I closed my eyes, but the images were burned there now. I knew what I had to do next. I had to show someone who had the power to do more than just look. The next morning, I printed 3 of the worst photos and slid them into a cheap envelope. My hands shook so much I almost jammed the paper in the old printer. The house felt like it was holding its breath, every photo on the wall watching me. I didn't go to work. I went to the police station. The building smelled like old paper, coffee, and rain-soaked coats. People sat on plastic chairs, eyes glazed, clutching bags, files, or nothing at all. I felt oddly naked with just that thin envelope in my hand, like maybe I was overreacting, like maybe I was insane. At the front desk, a woman in a blue uniform looked up, tired but not unkind. "Can I help you, sir?" I think my daughter's husband is hurting her," I said. My voice sounded too loud in my own ears. "I don't have bruises, I have photos." She blinked once, then gestured to a chair in the corner. "Take a seat," she said. "Someone will talk to you." A younger officer came out 10 minutes later. He led me to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. No window, just fluorescent light buzzing overhead like an insect. I laid the photos out one by one. Emma by the lake, Mark's fingers digging into her side. Emma dancing, his mouth at her ear, her eyes unfocused. Emma in that hallway, pushed against the wall, his hand clamped around her arm. The officer didn't rush. He studied each one, jaw tightening a fraction. "These could be concerning," he said slowly. "But they're still photos. We don't know what happened before or after. Has she ever reported anything? Told you something was wrong?" "No," I said. "She says he's stressed, that he had a hard childhood, that he grabs when he's angry but doesn't mean it. She defends him the way people defend hurricanes." He looked up at me. "Has she ever had unexplained injuries? Changes in behavior?" I thought of the bruises she laughed off, the way her phone seemed to rule her, the quick apologies for everything. "Yes," I whispered. "But she calls it clumsiness, says I'm dramatic." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Domestic abuse is hard without the victim on board," he said. "We can't arrest a man because a photo looks bad, but the images matter. If she ever wants help, this becomes evidence. Proof it didn't just start later." He pulled a card from his pocket and slid it across the table. "Hotline," he said. "Counselors, shelters, and this, another card, is a detective who handles family cases. Email her the photos. She'll log them. You talk to your daughter. Gently. Don't corner her. Don't make him the only safe place when you leave." I stared at the cards like they were instructions in a language I'd never learned. "How do I tell her," I asked, "that I know? That I see it now?" "Start with what you feel," he replied. "Not with what he is. I'm worried about you is easier to hear than he's a monster." On the way to her apartment, my heart beat so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. The city moved around me like usual. Buses, kids with backpacks, couples with coffee cups. but it felt like walking through someone else's life. Emma and Mark lived in one of those new buildings with glass balconies and clean hallways that smell like air freshener and fresh paint. Too smooth, too perfect. I stood at her door for a full minute before knocking. When she opened, she was barefoot in leggings and an oversized sweater, hair in a loose knot. For a split second, she was my teenager again, home from school complaining about math. "Dad," she said, surprised, "you didn't text." "I needed to see you," I answered. "Can I come in?" She hesitated just long enough for me to notice, then stepped aside. The apartment looked like a magazine spread. Neutral colors, big couch, no clutter. No childhood photos, no trace of the old house. Only new frames on the shelves. Emma and Mark at the beach, Emma and Mark at dinner, Emma and Mark at the wedding. He was everywhere. I was nowhere. "Want coffee?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "No," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant. "Emma, sit with me a second." We sat on opposite ends of the couch. The fabric was too soft. I missed the sag of my old one. I took the envelope from my jacket and placed it gently on the coffee table between us. "The photographer called me," I said. Her fingers tightened around the hem of her sweater. "Why?" she asked too quickly. "About what?" He showed me some photos he thought I should see. I pushed the envelope toward her. I printed a few. She opened it with careful fingers, like the paper might cut her. The first photo slid out. I watched the blood drain from her face. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, though she already knew. "Ethan," I said. He didn't feel right sending them with all the rest. He thought I needed to see what was happening when you thought nobody was watching. She stared at the hallway photo. Her eyes moved over her own face, his hand, the tension in her shoulders. "It's not what it looks like," she said automatically. "He was just upset. Weddings are a lot. You know how he gets when what?" I cut in softly. "When things aren't exactly how he planned. When you laugh with someone too long. When your father won't sign papers." Her jaw clenched. "You don't know him," she snapped. "You see one bad moment and build a whole story. He's under pressure. He works hard. Sometimes he snaps. I make him mad too. I say things." I leaned forward, heartbreaking at the way she folded herself smaller with every sentence. "Emma," I said, my voice shaking. "Look at your face." She refused. "Look," I repeated. She looked, not at him, at herself, at the girl pressed to the wall, at the flicker of fear she had never admitted to. Her shoulders shuddered once. "He didn't hit me," she said finally, like it was a defense. "He's never punched me." "Not really." "Not yet," I whispered. Silence settled between us, heavy and thick. The fridge hummed. Somewhere outside a car door slammed. Life went on, indifferent. "He says I'm lucky," she murmured after a while, eyes still on the photos. "That no one else would put up with me. That I talk too much. That I don't know how money works. That I'd be lost without him." I felt something hot and wild rise in my chest. "You were never lost," I said. "Not until he started telling you that." Her eyes shone now, but the tears didn't fall. "You don't understand him," she whispered. "He had it rough growing up. His father was worse. He's trying. He loves me. He just grabs sometimes." "Love doesn't leave fingerprints," I said. Before she could answer, the lock on the front door clicked. We both turned our heads at the same time. The handle turned. The door opened. Mark stepped in, tie loosened, jacket over his arm, eyes immediately narrowing at the sight of me on his couch and the photos spread out on his table. The door swung open like a scene we weren't ready for. Mark stepped in, keys in one hand, jacket over his arm. His eyes went straight to me, then to Emma, then to the photos on the table. The change on his face was fast, smile gone, jaw tight, something dark sliding in behind his eyes. "What's this?" he asked, voice low. He crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched up the prints. His eyes flicked over them. He didn't even need to look long. He knew exactly when those moments had happened. "You went to the photographer?" he said, staring at me. "Digging for dirt?" "He called me," I answered. "He was worried." "Like I am." Mark laughed once, sharp. "Worried?" he repeated. "Because a man held his wife at his own wedding? Because she didn't grin wide enough for the camera?" He turned to Emma. "I told you," he said. "Your father would try to poison you against me." Emma shrank back into the couch, hands twisting in her sweater. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Mark, please," she started. He cut her off, stepping closer. "You showed him our photos?" he snapped. "You embarrassed me? You made me look like some kind of monster to this old man who can't mind his own business?" Something in me snapped. "She's not your property," I said, standing up. My knees hurt, but anger straightened my spine. "And you don't get to lay hands on her like that and complain about how you look." His head whipped toward me. "You think anyone will believe you?" he hissed. "Old, bitter, broke. You hate that she has more now than she did with you." He reached for Emma's wrist then, fast, practiced. The same motion from the photos, now in real time. His fingers clamped down. She gasped. "Mark, you're hurting me," she whispered. That was it. "Let her go," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was lower, steadier. "Now." Or I called the police. They've already seen the pictures. They already know your name. He froze. For a second, no one moved. The apartment hummed. The fridge, the pipes, the life they'd tried to build here. Then from the hallway, a loud knock on the door we'd left slightly ajar. "Everything okay in there?" A woman's voice called. We heard shouting. A second voice further away. "Should I call building security?" Mark's grip loosened just a fraction. Emma wrenched her wrist back and stepped toward me without thinking, like muscle memory from childhood. He saw that. "You're making a scene," he hissed, "in my home." I took my phone out slowly, thumb hovering over the emergency call. "Touch her again," I said, "and you'll be explaining that scene to an officer, with prints and dates and witnesses." For a moment, I thought he might come at me. He looked at my phone, at Emma, at the shadow under the door where a neighbor was literally listening. Cowardice won. He grabbed his jacket. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll regret this, both of you." He slammed the door so hard the frames on the wall rattled. His face, smiling, perfect, harmless, stared at us from every one of those photos. Emma stood there shaking, one hand on her wrist. A faint red mark was already blooming where he'd grabbed her. She stared at it like it belonged to someone else. "I'm so stupid," she whispered. "Dad, I'm so—" "Don't," I cut in gently. "You're not stupid. You're scared. That's not the same thing." That night, we emailed the detective. We sent the photos. All of them. We called the hotline together, Emma's hand in mine like she was 13 again, asking if I would leave. There were meetings, statements, a restraining order. Some of our relatives said I'd overreacted. His parents called Emma ungrateful. The cost of the truth spread out like cracks in glass. He didn't hit her again. Not after that. Not legally, not with his hands, but the damage was already done. A few weeks later, Emma moved back into the old house, into her childhood room, the one with the faint ring in the carpet where her toy castle used to sit. She slept with the light on at first, waking at every car door outside. One evening, we sat on the back steps with 2 mugs of tea like we used to. The maple tree rustled above us, older now, still standing. On my lap was a photo album, not the wedding one. I never ordered it. This album held everything else. Emma as a baby, covered in cake. Emma in the tree. Emma with braces and bad bangs. Emma at 16, grinning in a thrift store dress. Photos Claire had taken, prints worn from being held. "I keep thinking about those pictures," Emma said quietly, staring into the yard. "The ones from the wedding. How I don't even remember some of those moments, and yet they're the proof." "Proof of what?" I asked. She thought for a long time. "Proof that it was really that bad," she said. "Proof that I wasn't imagining it. Proof that I wasn't smiling because I was happy. I was smiling because I knew everyone was watching." A breeze moved through the leaves, carrying the familiar smell of damp earth and distant neighbors cooking. "You know what's funny?" I said. "Your mom always said photos would help us remember the best parts. Turns out sometimes they're the only way we admit the worst parts even happened." Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Going to see them? Showing me?" I looked at the tree, at the house, at her wrist, where the red mark had faded but not vanished completely in my mind. "I regret not seeing sooner," I answered, "but I don't regret the truth, even when it hurts like hell." We sat there until the sky turned the same color as the old wallpaper in our living room. The photos had destroyed something. The fantasy of a happy marriage, the illusion of a perfect son-in-law, the story Emma was trying so hard to live inside. But they also gave us something back, a chance, a second draft. I closed the album gently. "Next time," I said, "we'll take new pictures. Not of weddings, of this, tea on the steps, you being free. It's not glamorous, but it's real." She smiled, a small, tired smile, but it reached her eyes this time. "If you're still here with me, tell me in the comments. Would you want to know what those photos showed, even if it cost you your family? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch the next story. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't in the dark. They're right there in the frame, waiting for someone to zoom in."